Hello, Speedbird 830 Delta, established 7 miles, wireless 2 left.
Speedbird 830 Delta, good morning, continue approach. Wind 29 0 degrees, 10 knots.
Continue approach, Speedbird 830 Delta.
500.
Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are headed off on an outing in the Zibo 737-800. I thought with the PMDG 737 not too far around the corner from Microsoft Flight Simulator, it might be a good idea to get my head down, start learning the 737 procedures. That way hopefully I can hit the ground running when it comes to a review video later on. Our flight today, we are currently on the ground at London Gatwick, and we're going to be making a very short hop up north towards Manchester. Airborne time should be around 43 minutes, so it's going to be just over an hour from blocks off to blocks on. In terms of the flight plan, we're carrying about 110 passengers, we've got about 2 tons of cargo on board. We're going to be cruising at flight level 240, we're holding Liverpool as our alternate. The weather in both Manchester and Liverpool a very nice morning, so all up we've loaded 4.6 tons of fuel for our flight. Once again, the aim of the game today is to learn the aircraft, so if you do have any constructive criticism or feedback for me in terms of 737 procedures, please feel free to leave those down in the comments section below. I'm not expecting that we're going to get everything right, and similarly I'm sure a lot of Airbus-isms are going to creep in along the way as well. Anyway guys, I do hope you enjoy the flight as well. If you do, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. We've just arrived at the jet, it's more or less cold and dark, so we'll get ourselves on board and start running through our pre-flight prep. So good morning and welcome to the cockpit of something a little bit different today. As I say, we are in the cockpit of the Zibo 737-800 and we're going to be taking the aircraft on a bit of a familiarisation flight up towards Manchester. As best as possible we're going to try and operate the aircraft from memory, we'll run through our flows ahead of time, but of course we'll probably miss a few items along the way, so we'll use the checklist there to back things up. Anyway, so far we've just got ourselves sat down, we've got the aircraft standby power on and we just fired up the APU that's now on the bus. Similarly we've got the APU feeding the packs for a little bit of air conditioning down the back. So working our way through the overhead panel, we've got the aft left fuel pump on already. I believe that's correct if we're running the APU. We'll get the rest of the wing tank pumps on. And working our way up the overhead, the yaw damper stays off for the time being, I believe. We need to start aligning the IRSs. Interestingly, only 2 on the 737 as opposed to 3 on the Airbus. Lights can stay off for the time being. Again, we've got the APU on the bus already. Standby power is on. We've got the cabin utilities and the IFE on. And the electric panel is checked. We'll stay on the right ignition for the start this morning. Engine start switches are both in the auto position. No smoking signs and the seatbelt signs can go on. We've already got all of our fuel on board. You can see we've got about 4.6 tons on board the aircraft currently. Cockpit lighting we'll leave as is for the time being. The hydraulics, I believe we leave the electric pumps off, the engine driven pumps of course not actually doing anything currently. I think the elect pumps go on once we start the push. Anti-ice is off. Probe heats, again we leave those off for the time being, the window heats can come on. And down to the lights, we want the position light set to steady. For the cabin pressurization, the flight altitude will be flight level 240. And aerodrome elevation at Gatwick is 203 feet, we've got 200, so that's set, we're in auto. And onto the pressurization panel, again we've got the APU bleed feeding the packs are on and the isolation valve is in the auto position. Reset fans are on, we've got the trim air on as well. And I believe most of the functionality up here is maintenance functionality. So coming down to the forward panel, we'll set the altimeter, the QNH currently 1028. So with 1028 we're reading 200 feet, that's correct, as we just said the aerodrome elevation 203. 1028 there on the standby.
121.1, Delta 678, straight back.
And we have 1028 on the first officer side. Water brake we'll leave off for the time being. And coming up now to the EFIS control panels and the MCP. We'll go to 20 in map mode for the time being. And we want the flight directors on, mine first, so that the left-hand flight director is the master. Ordinarily I think we'd set the FMC up first so that we can set the correct speed, but we're just going slightly out of order here for the sake of the video. We'll set the FMC up last. Heading, we'll set that later on once we've got the runway in, and we're going to be climbing up to an altitude of 5,000 feet as per the SID. So that's all set. Coming down to the pedestal, the speed brakes are retracted, flaps are retracted, throttles are idle, engine masters are off, park brake is set. Radios we're not going to worry about too much for the flight today. We're not going to be using the comm radios. We'll set the nav radios up later on for the arrival into Manchester. The weather radar doesn't appear to be functional on the Zibo, but that's off. Transponder is set to standby. Rudder trim is set neutral. And again, the same on the first officer's side. We're not going to worry too much about the radios. The cockpit door's still open for the time being. We'll close that up later on once we've got everybody on board and the ground agents come onto the aircraft. So that's the preliminary cockpit setup complete. We'll just start running through the checklist there. So the park brake is set, battery guard is closed, standby power guard is closed, left centre fuel pump is on, and we've got the rest of the fuel pumps on there as well. The APU is running, APU gen is on the bus, position lights are set to steady, logo lights are off, cabin lights are set as required, emergency exit lights, we missed those, we need to arm those up, passenger signs are on, packs are set to auto, IRS mode selectors are set to nav, and we can now come down to the FMC and we'll begin setting that up. So coming down now to the FMC, the first thing we'll do is hit FMC. Checking the aircraft status, we have a 737-800, engine rating is 26k. The navigation database is slightly out of date, but that's the most up-to-date one that I currently have for the aircraft. We'll go to Posinit. Reference airport will be Gatwick, Echo Golf, Kilo Kilo. And we're currently on stand 11. So we'll take the stand reference and we'll set the IRSs to align off that. Next we'll come to our route. So origin is Gatwick. Destination will be Manchester, Echo Golf, Charlie Charlie. Flight number is Speedbird, or I guess in today's case it'll be Shuttle, Bravo Alpha, and it'll be 2508. And for the runway, we're expecting a departure off runway 08 right. That'll be the Lambourne 1 Zulu departure. Going back to the route page, we'll go to next page. So the Lambourne 1 Zulu takes us out towards Lambourne. It'll then be the November 57 airway. And that'll take us out towards waypoint Welling. Whiskey Echo Lima India November. After that there'll be the Tango 420 airway. And that takes us out towards the Trent VOR, which is Tango November Tango. And we can activate all of that. For the arrival, expecting the ILS-05 left, and it's going to be the Dane to Alpha arrival that we're expecting. We're not going to be coming in via the VOR itself, so again we'll hit execute. So back to the route page, that's now all in. On the climb page, we're expecting a cruise altitude of flight level 240. We'll run through the legs, make sure they're all correct versus the paper flight plan. So we've got out towards the Lambourne VOR, then on to Welling, in towards Trent, then on towards Dane, and then expecting the ILS-05 left. Next we can come back to init. We'll enter in the gross weight of the aircraft, which is 58.8 tons. Zero fuel weight 51.4, that checks. Reserves 1.6 tons minimum fuel for diversion. Cost index for the flight is 34. We have too steep of a descent after waypoint Dane, obviously that's not a concern for the time being, so we'll clear that. So cruising at flight level 240, the average wind for the flight 095 at 32.
Hello, it's the exit Tango, the fleet line 120, back to your arrival 290 knots.
and transition altitude is 6,000. Again, we'll execute all of that. N1 limit, we'll take the D-rate 2 for the takeoff, and same for the climb, we'll go for a D-rate there in the climb. And lastly, coming to the takeoff page, it'll be a flaps 5 takeoff. The trim is 25.2. That gives us a stab of 5.25, we'll set that later on. And for the V-speeds there, we have a V1 130, VR 131, and V2 139. Just coming back to the climb page again, so we've got 240, climb at 291.75, 250 knots below 10. We've got a restriction to be above Kilo Kilo Echo at 2000, we're going to meet that easily. Into the cruise again, flight level 240, 300 knots or 0.76. And for the descent we've got 0.76 back to 286, 240 below 10. And everything looking good. So we'll just go back to the takeoff page, we'll take the progress page on the first officer side. Again, we'll continue our setup of the MCP, we need to put in the takeoff speed as well as the runway heading. In the meantime though, whilst we're down here, we'll just brief the departure. So as we said, expecting the Lambourne 1 Zulu departure off runway 08 right, that's plate 20-3 Mike. It's an RNAV SID. Essentially we're departing runway heading out towards Kilo Kilo Echo 02. Again, we need to be above 2,000 feet there. There'll then be a left turn out towards Kilo Kilo Echo 12. Up to 5,000, that's what we've got set on the MCP, maintaining a speed of 250 knots. And after waypoint Kilo Kilo November 43, we can climb up to 6,000, maintaining that until we're out towards Lambourne, and again maintaining the 250 knot speed restriction. No turns below 710 feet, so effectively 500 feet above aerodrome elevation. And of course maintaining our altitude until we're cleared for a further climb by air traffic. Transition altitude is 6,000 feet, again it is an RNAV SID. In terms of the terrain, there's no significant terrain around. The sector MSA for our departure, 2,300 feet. Weather-wise, it's a nice day as you've seen, a little bit of cloud coverage around, so with the temperature outside of 4 degrees, expecting we'll have to take the engine anti-ice on later on during the climb. And in terms of our taxi, we're currently off stand 11, we're going to be pushing back onto Whiskey, and then we'll be looking to taxi out either via Zulu or Juliet, all the way down to holding point Juliet for runway 08 right. So that's our briefing complete. As I say, we'll continue on with the cockpit setup, and I'll come back to you again once the passengers are on board and we are more or less ready to commence the push.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
Okay, so we finished our cockpit setup, we've got the last of our passengers on board and the aircraft doors are closed up. Just running through the rest of our pre-flight checklist, the transponder is set. IAS we have set at V2 plus 10, so that's 149. Heading is set to runway heading, and we have 5,000 feet set as our initial altitude. Yaw damper is on. Window heat is on. Flight altitude, we have flight level 240 set. Landing altitude we have 200 set. LNAV we have selected, VNAV is off for the time being. Altimeter, we have QNH 1028 set across the board. Auto brake is set to RTO. Comm radios are set. The cockpit door is closed. We are now ready for the push, so we'll run through the before start checks. Auto throttle is armed. Fuel pumps are on. Again, the centre tank pumps are off since we don't have any fuel in the centre tank. Electric hydraulic pumps can go on. Anti-collision light can go on. Parking brake can come off. The tug should be ready for the push.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Okay, so he's commencing the push. Again, should be pushing us back onto taxiway Whiskey. We are cleared for the engine start. So running through the engine start checks, the secondary display is set to engine. Packs can go off. And interestingly, the checklist I'm using calls for the engine 1 to be started first. My memory was always that we started engine 2 on the 737, but I'll go with what I've got here in the checklist. So engine 1 start selector can go to ground. And we have N2 rotation, we'll just monitor that until we're up to around 25% before we introduce the fuel.
103 X-ray Tango, good day to you, and cleared directed to Latmo.
Latmo, 938.
N1 just starting to rotate there as well. There's our 25%. So the engine 1 fuel control lever can go on.
Headliner 583 kilo, can I start reducing speed? 583 kilo, A4, maintain speed 250 knots per example.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Just monitoring that EGT. The aircraft is stationary, the park brake can go on.
Disconnecting tow, stand by.
And we have starter cutout, you might have just heard that. We'll take progress page as I said on the first officer side there. And we have a good start on the number 1, the engine is stable, we'll start number 2. So we do have 2 good starts. The tug's just disconnected and he's given us signals on the right hand side. So running through the after start checks, the engine driven generators can come onto the bus. Get the probe heats on. Packs can go back to auto. Isolation valve is set to auto. Engine bleeds can go on. The Apu Bleed can come off. Starters can go to continuous. Apu Master can come off. And running through the before taxi checks, generators are on, probe heats are on, wing and engine anti-ice not required, the packs are set to auto, isolation valve is set to auto, Apu Bleed is off, engine start switches are set to continuous, flaps, as we discussed it'll be a flaps 5 takeoff, so we'll set flaps 5, and just waiting for the flaps to roll out there. Elevator trim we're looking for 5.25 units. So trim is set. There's flaps 5 indicated. We'll carry out a flight control check.
Okay, 250 knots as long as possible, liner 582.
So we have full up, full down, and neutral, full left, full right, and neutral, and on the rudder, full left, full right, and neutral. We'll carry out a recall. No items for us there. We can clear up the secondary display screen there. And for the taxi lights can come on. We'll get the runway turn-off lights on as well. As I mentioned, we're currently on taxiway Whiskey, so we're going to be taking a left turn here onto taxiway Juliet, and then we'll take Juliet down to the holding point for runway 08 right. So park brake can come off. And just coming up on the throttles to get the aircraft moving.
Echo India Foxtrot Indian, good day to you, and QNH is 1014, Baldon Latch from the R15, maintain VF4, remain clear of controlled airspace.
So taxiway Juliet just off the nose.
Copied on the traffic for Baldon, QNH 1014, maintain clear of controlled airspace, maintain VF4, Echo India Foxtrot India.
And we can actually come left here onto Mike, we'll join onto Zulu, and then that will join back onto Juliet. We'll clear on the left. And you can see we are now on taxiway Zulu, so we'll take the next right. And again, that will link up with Juliet, taking us all the way down to the holding point for 08 right. I've got to say I'm really impressed with enhanced skyscapes. You can see, I would say the sim not looking too far off Microsoft Flight Simulator in terms of graphics, with the Enhanced Skyscapes edition, and of course it's really nice to have a high quality, high fidelity airliner add-on in the sim. I'm really enjoying the 737 as well, it's a nice change of pace. We'll continue our taxi straight ahead. We can run through our before takeoff checks. So centre fuel tank pumps are off, de-ice is not required, cabin lights are set as required, flight instruments are checked, engine instruments are checked. Takeoff data, we have a V1 130, V2 139, and we have 149 set there on the MCP. And that's the before takeoff checks down to the line. So a little chicane here just to join back onto Juliet. Again, all clear on the right. So we'll continue our taxi down Juliet, we'll hold just short of 08 right. It's going to take us a little while to get down there, so I'll come back to you once we're down at the holding point and we're ready for the takeoff.
And Dublin, good morning, Shamrock 2 Charlie Juliet, descending flight level 130, direct Lapo.
Shamrock 2 Charlie Juliet, hello, descend flight level 120, next level change 11 miles.
Descend flight level 120 and copy, Shamrock 2 Charlie Juliet.
Okay, so we are now down at the holding point for runway 08 right. We've just been given our takeoff clearance, so the landing lights can go on, taxi light can go off, strobe lights are on, transponder is set to TARA. We'll start the clock and just checking there's no traffic coming down final. Park brake can come off. And we'll get ourselves lined up on the runway.
Dublin, good morning, it's Irish 281, airborne from Casement, passing 2,400 feet to 4,000 on a track 270 and our squawk 6320.
Irish 281, good day to you. I have radar contact and climb flight level 120.
Clear to climb flight level 120, Irish 281.
So we'll just get ourselves lined up, we'll take the aircraft on the roll. So coming up to 40%, waiting for the engines to stabilise. Everything looking good, so we'll hit toga and take off. We have throttle hold.
D1 retain.
Coming back on the yoke.
Positive brake.
And we'll take the gear up. So pitching for 15 degrees initially. We can follow the flight directives up through 400 feet. So we'll take VNAV, we'll get the autopilot in, and we should maintain the thruster up through 1500 feet. There's 1500, the thrust coming back to our climb power setting. Accelerating up to a speed of 230 knots initially. We'll come back to flaps 1.
Dublin Red Eye, low running HOTAS, passing 2000, coming on 0 runway direct.
Runner 8 Whiskey Yankee identified, climb 50120.
And we'll go flap 0. We'll just come out on the range, go for 40 miles for the time being on the navigation display. And the after takeoff checks. The auto brake can go off. Engine start selectors can go back to auto. We'll get the runway turn off lights off. Landing gear selector can go back to the off position. And running through the after takeoff checks. Auto brake is off. Engine start switches are in auto. Gear lever is in the off position. Runway turn off lights are off and the cabin lights are set as required. Just coming up into a little bit of cloud, the OAT only +5, so we'll take the engine anti-ice on. It's 1 to go, accelerating out to 250 knots. We'll level off at 5,000 momentarily. We have FMC speed and VNAV path. You see the aircraft has now accelerated up to 250 knots. And it should maintain that here as we level off. So for the climb out checks, we have the autopilot on command A. Altimeters, we're still down at 5,000 feet, so we'll leave those for the time being. We'll just hold the checklist there. We'll assume now that air traffic's given us direct Lambourne, climb flight level 110. So we'll select 110 on the MCP. Now we have 110. With that restriction, we'll go into level change. We have 250 knots, and we have N1 MCP speed 110. We'll go direct to Lambourne, so we'll go to legs. There's Lambourne, Lima Alpha Mike. We'll put that on the top line, and you can see that gives us direct to Lambourne, so we'll execute. Still no nav, so the aircraft's going to take us straight there. And we're now climbing nicely up to flight level 110, just coming up through transition altitude. So we'll go standard on the altimeters.
Climbing west, level 120, landing 18 Whiskey Yankee.
Irish 281, turn left to Baker.
To Baker, Irish 281.
And we have standard set and cross-checked. Should get a pretty good view of London as we go past. You can't quite see it yet, but you can see the Thames and the city CBD down there off the Tower 11 o'clock. Again, we'll come out on the range. We'll go with 80 miles for the time being. And we'll assume we've given further climb now up to our cruising flight level, so flight level 240.
Ryanair 71 Fox Yankee, descend flight level 130, speed 290 knots, inbound takeoff.
And we have 240 indicated on the PFD. So altimeters are set, just coming up on 10,000 feet, landing lights can go off. And we are just coming above the cloud layer, so we'll cycle the seatbelt signs, let the cam crew start working. Again, we don't need the centre fuel tank pump, so the climb out checklist is complete. Up through 10,000. We've got steep descent after waypoint Dane, again we'll clear that. And for the climb, we're looking now for a target speed of 291, we're above 10,000 feet. We'll just leave ourselves in level change until we're through the restriction here at Lambourne. We'll leave the FMC on the climb page. Well above the cloud layer now, so the engine anti-ice can come off. And we'll just leave the passenger sat down ever so slightly longer here, give the cabin crew time to get up and about.
Shamrock 2 Charlie Juliet, descend flight level 80.
Descend flight level 80, Shamrock 2 Charlie Juliet.
Travel Ryanair 40 Whiskey Juliet, hello, passing level 180, descending level 130, Nevada.
Ryanair 40 Whiskey Juliet, Dublin, hello, 9 2 Lima, descend flight level 80.
9 2 Lima, right, descend level 80, Ryanair 40 Whiskey Juliet.
So we're just coming overhead Lambourne. Well in is now the active waypoint, so we've cleared our restriction. We'll go back into VNAV. And we have VNAV speed now on the FMA. Interestingly, that's brought the top of climb right back there. We're showing level now just after Lambourne, which does make a lot more sense. I presume having the aircraft in level change there gave us a spurious top of climb for whatever reason. That may be an issue with the Zibo mod, that may be true to life of the real world aircraft, and again, I'm not that familiar with the 737. Already we're showing about 150 miles to run till Manchester. And that concurs with the FMC there, 150 miles. So at flight level 240, that means we're going to need about 100 miles to carry out the descent. That's going to give us about 40 miles to carry out the setup, so pretty much perfect. As soon as we're levelled off, we'll start briefing the arrival.
Liner 71 Foxtrot Yankee, good day to you, and descend to flight level 80. Continue to backflow.
Continue to backflow and descend to flight level 80, Ryanair 71 Fox Yankee.
And it's pretty overcast en route, so we're again not going to get much of a view of the scenery as we track inbound towards Manchester, which is a bit of a shame. The Orbeck scenery and X-Plane looks really rather good. So there's one to go.
1,000 to go.
And that checks.
281, contact Dublin on 135.655 for higher. Bye-bye.
So just waiting for the aircraft to level off, we'll make sure the autopilot's doing what it's supposed to. There's FM speed, VNAV path.
Back to Dublin 135.655, Irish 281, bye.
And levelling off flight level 240, just accelerating up to our cruise speed of 301 knots. We're not even going to reach our calculated cruise Mach number today. Expecting to arrive at Manchester with 2.6 tonnes. We said we needed 1.6 for our alternate, so we've got about an extra tonne of fuel, about an extra 20 or so minutes up our sleeve. Anyway, as I say, we'll run through the brief and then we'll get the aircraft set up for the arrival. So expecting the Dane 2 Alpha arrival for the ILS 05 left. It's plate 10-2 coming in from the Trent VOR inbound towards waypoint Dane. Will then be radar vectors round onto 05 left. For the ILS itself, it's plate 11-1. It's the ILS 05 left. Frequency is 109.5. I believe the more modern 737s do auto-tune that, but we've got that tuned up already in Nav1 just in case we need it. The final approach course is 052, so we'll set that now. So we have 052 on my side, we'll set that as well on the first officer side. And 052. Aerodrome elevation is 257 feet, so we'll set that on the cabin pressurization panel. We have 250 feet. We're going down to an MDA of 412 for the Cat 1, and again we'll set that.
Irish 281, Dublin, good morning, climb flight level 230.
Climb flight level 230, Irish.
So we have 412 on my side. We won't bother to set that on the first officer side. It's a little bit fiddly trying to click that from over here. So 412 the MDA. There's a profile check at 8.6 DME, 3,000 feet. And for the missed approach, it's climbed straight ahead up to 3,500 feet and then as directed by air traffic control. In terms of the terrain, we do have some high terrain around Manchester, mostly out towards the east and the north of the field. The MSA for the arrival is 3,100 feet, highest MSA 3,500 feet. Weather is much the same as we saw out of Gatwick. Just check Sky Vector there and see what the weather's currently doing. Coming up on 40 miles now to run till our top of descent. So weather in Manchester, it's 020 at 2, very light winds, 10 k's plus visibility. There's some scattered cloud around at 2,300 feet. 0 degrees on the ground, the QNH is 1030. I believe we can pre-select that ahead of time.
Okay, thanks, 715, Yankee.
Liner 8 Whiskey Yankee, increase the speed when able to 290 knots.
And we'll set that now on the standby just as a reminder. So QNH 1030, and again overall very nice weather conditions on the ground in Manchester. Planning to land on 05 left, as I mentioned. We'll be vacating off to the left. Auto brake, we'll go for auto brake 2. Not really sure what the most common setting is in the 737. 2 seems like a reasonable compromise. We can arm up the spoilers. We have speed brake armed. And planning to vacate, probably off at hotel. And then we'll taxi in somewhere towards the Terminal 3 parking area. Fuel, as we discussed, now showing 2.8 on the ground at Manchester. We needed 1.6 for our diversion, which is out towards Liverpool. So we've got about an extra 1.2 now, so pretty much an extra 30 minutes up our sleeve, which makes sense. That's more or less what I planned for the flight today.
Appears 18 with the Yankee.
18 with the Yankee, contact Dublin 129.18. Good day.
Dublin 129.18, good day.
Air 71 Foxtrot Yankee, contact approach 1211. Good day.
Approach 1211, goodbye, Ryanair 71 Fox Yankee. Dublin information, Echo India Golf in the uniform.
Showing 86 track miles to run towards the field now, so we're a little bit high versus that top of descent, I would say. We'll come into level change. We're not going to bother with VNAV. We don't really have any constraints on the way down. And similarly, I think we're a little bit high actually. The aircraft's top of descent there isn't what I would have gone for, so we'll probably have to increase our rate of descent here to get us back onto profile. I presume that gives us direct from Dane inbound towards the ILS there with that discontinuity that we're going to have. Anyway, we have LNAV MCP speed. We're descending down to flight level 110. Descent checks, we'll get the engine anti-ice on. Landing altitude is set. We'll do a recall. Again, nothing for us there. Radio out is set. We've got Barrow of 412. Auto brake, we have auto brake 2 set. And just waiting on transition altitude before we set the altimeters. And below 10,000 feet before we carry out the checklist below the line. So coming up on 21,000 feet, that means we need 84 miles for the descent. Currently showing 78, so we're only about 6 miles shy of what we need. So we're not going to adjust the speed or anything just yet, we'll see how we go. We'll see whether or not the aircraft trends back towards profile. I would assume this is giving us our vertical deviation from the profile. It looks like that's counting up at the moment, so according to the aircraft we're actually trending away from profile currently. Coming up through 20,000 now, which means we need about 80 miles for the descent. We're showing 75, so we're only about 5 miles shy. I think overall we're actually going to converge quite nicely on the profile. Coming up through 20,000, we'll get the seatbelt signs on once again. And the total air temperature outside, minus 13, so definitely worth having that engine anti-ice on as we continue our descent. Generally in the climb you get the engine anti-ice on as and when you enter the icing conditions. In the descent we tend to do things a little bit ahead of time. We've got a decel waypoint at the Trent VOR there. I believe that brings us back to the 250 knot restriction below both 10,000 and the speed limit points. But as we're in level change, the aircraft isn't automatically going to slow down. We'd need to be in VNAV for that to happen, at least that's my understanding how the 737 works.
Echo India Golf India Uniform, good day to you, and QNH at Dublin is 1014 and Baldon last in the R15 only.
Just checking the estimated fuel quantity there, so we've got 3.2 on board at the moment, 2.8 on the ground in Manchester, so we're expecting to burn about 400 kilos here in the descent. Just trying to get a feel really for how the 737 compares in terms of performance.
Trans 76 Zulu Whiskey, hello, climb flight level 120.
Climb flight level 120, Air France 26 Zulu Whiskey.
Ryder 98, Echo Papa, stop descent 120 please. stop descent, 120, runner down at Echo Papa. We may have a slide. This will be leveling at 11.8. I will be returning to 120. That's okay, thanks.
The transition altitude is actually by air traffic coming into Manchester, so we'll assume that 7,000 is our transition level. We'll set the altimeters. And that's giving us 7,000. Cross-checked on both sides. Looking good on the profile. Running through our approach checks, the altimeters are set. Localizer frequency 1095 is set. And approach course 052 is set. We're not going to arm up the approach just yet. We'll wait until we're inbound on a reasonable heading to do that. Slightly hazy conditions coming into Manchester, but again, that's not entirely accurate though, because according to the real-world forecast we did have scattered cloud at 2,300 feet. Showing about 15 miles now inbound towards the localizer. And maybe just starting to trend a touch low here, but we'll go for that for the time being. We're still doing 250 knots, so we're going to have to reduce our descent rate to reduce our speed. And just coming up on 25 miles, so we'll start reducing that speed now.
Military is active and QNH is 1014. Echo Takeoff in the uniform.
I'm not entirely sure how they choose to configure the flaps on the 737, but I'm going to go for flaps 5 initially. We'll go for flaps 15 just before we take the gear, and again it'll be a flaps 30 landing. I think in the real world they don't tend to go through each individual stage. I could be wrong on that. Again, please let me know in the comments if you know any better.
Echoing to Golf India Uniform, just confirming right to the west for information only and maintain a VF4. Remain clear of control airspace.
And on that note, we'll take flaps 5. Come back to 200 knots.
Sorry, yeah, out to the west for 30 minutes and we'll fly with VF4. Echo Takeoff in the uniform.
Roger.
Showing 5,500 feet now on the altimeter. The aircraft actually climbing ever so slightly there. I'm surprised if that's true to life. That might just be the flaps causing the aircraft to balloon a little, I suppose.
Continue on the back south to Lima arrival, descend to flight level 80.
So we've got our 200 knots, 5,000 feet. We'll come into VS. We're descending a little bit quicker than I'd like here. We're only doing 215 knots over the ground, so we only really need a VS of 1,000 feet per minute to maintain our 3-degree path. So with MCP speed VS, 5,000 feet, 20 miles to run, so again looking good on profile.
Flight level 80 and continuing to
We're coming again on the range on the nav display. And we'll start our turn now inbound towards the airport. Go for a heading of 310.
Ryanair 583 kilo, wind 280 degrees, 9 knots, runway suited left, clear to land.
Just keeping a good eye on our distance to run, so that we can plan our configuration and our deceleration.
Air France 760 Whiskey, confirm passing altitude. Passing now 2,400 feet, Air France 760 Whiskey. Air France 760 Whiskey, thank you, identified. Report speed to Scottish 128 at 055.
East Scottish 128, 055, goodbye.
And we are picking up the ILS now on the PFD, showing India Mike Mike, so that's the correct identifier, 052. So we have VRR Loc and single channel showing at the moment. Just going to wait till we capture the glide slope before I arm up that other autopilot. Coming up on 12 miles, we'll hold the gear until we reach 8 miles. We can centre up the heading bug.
Chinook 15 miles cleared to Latmo and contact approach 1211. Good day.
And we have 052.
To Latmo and approach 1211.
So continuing our approach checks, the approach has been armed, glide slope we're just waiting on. Aircraft actually overshot the localizer slightly there. I don't think we gave it a particularly acute incept, but it is correcting. And just coming up on 10 DME, the glide slope just coming in there as well. Looks looks like we're still going to level off just before we hit that glide slope. It says out hold.
First morning, Denmark 15 Mike, descending, flight level 80, can land on 27.
1.5 Mike, good day, expect further descent to the flat.
Just coming on to the glide slope, we'll take flaps 15.
Liner 583 Kilo, contact ground 121.8, bye bye.
121.8, Liner 583 Kilo, thanks, bye.
There's our 8 miles, we'll take the gear down. Spoilers are armed, the runway turn-off lights can go on.
71 Fox, Yankee, reduce the 210 knots, cleared ILS approach from right.
There's our 3 greens, we'll bring the speed back to 160 knots. And we do have glide slope now, so we'll arm up the other autopilot. 3,500 feet was our missed approach altitude. Interestingly, still showing single channel there at the moment. Not entirely sure why that would be. So we're looking at 160 knots till around 5 DME. The approach checks, so the approach has been armed, glide slope is alive, gear is down, we have flaps 15, we'll go flaps 30. The second autopilot has been armed, engine start switches can go to continuous. And we have flaps 30 indicated, so the approach checks are complete. I wonder if perhaps we're going to come out of single channel once we reach a certain altitude. That would seem somewhat logical. There's 5 miles, so we'll come back to VREF, which is 139.
1.5 Mike, 210,
And the landing checks to go around altitude is set, runway turn-off lights are on, landing gear is down 3 greens. Autopilot is set as required, auto thrust is set as required. That is the landing checklist complete. Just going to come back on my thrust levers so we match them up with the position of our auto throttles.
150 to 75130 back down.
Shamrock 61 Juliet, good day to you. Descend to flight level 80.
Yeah, flight level 80, Shamrock 61 Juliet.
Liner 67, Papa Mike, contact Dublin 129 decimal 180, bye bye.
129, 180, Ryder 67, Papa, bye bye.
So nicely established on the ILS, just waiting until we come through 1,000 feet. And then we'll disconnect the autopilot. And again, just maintaining my throttle position versus the auto thrust, that way when we disconnect the auto thrust or the auto throttle, we can keep the thrust levers more or less where they are. Okay, so we are 1,000, we are stable, the missed approach altitude is set. We'll disconnect the autopilot. And we have flight director there on the FMA. You really notice the difference in flight modelling in X-Plane as well.
500.
Let's check 500. The big jets in Microsoft Flight Simulator really don't handle particularly nicely, but this feels really good. We'll disconnect our auto throttle.
300. Approaching minimums. 200. Minimums.
Okay, we'll continue.
100. 50. 40. 30.
Coming back on the throttles.
10.
Just floating a little bit long there. Let's touch down, we'll just go idle reverse. And lowering the nose wheel down onto the runway. Just letting the auto brake do its thing for the time being.
80 knots.
Cancel the auto brake. We'll vacate off to the next left, we'll cancel the reverse. So vacating the runway, landing lights can come off, taxi light can go on, we'll get the strobe lights off as well. We'll fire up the APU. It's going to be a pretty short taxi for us here. We'll come in onto stand 50.
Runway 28 left, clear to land.
Clear to land, 28 left, okay, to Tango.
Lufthansa 6 November X-ray, contact ground 121.8.
Runway turn off lights and taxi lights can go off. We'll get the flaps up.
121.8, Lufthansa 6 November X-ray, back.
We'll just hold the rest of our landing checks until we've got ourselves onto the bay. It's obviously a very short taxi here. Just get that auto brake off as well. We don't have any docking guidance, so we'll just stop the aircraft in a roughly appropriate position. And the aircraft is stationary, the park brake can go on. Running through our after landing checks, the transponder is set to standby, flaps are retracted, speed brake is down, landing lights are off, strobe lights are off, taxi light is now off, camera lights are set as required, anti-ice is off, APU is available, we'll take that now onto the bus. And we'll go for the APU bleed, the engine bleeds can come off. Probe heats are off, engine start switches are off, auto brake is off, runway turn off lights are off, taxi light is off. And for the shutdown checks, the park brake is set, APU is on the bus, the fuel control levers can go off.
Air 2 Kilo Alpha, good morning, line up runway 28 left.
Runway 22 left, Air 2 Kilo.
Passenger signs are off, anti-collision light can go off, fuel pumps are off, again we'll just leave the left aft on for the APU. Anti-ice is off, electric hydraulic pumps can go off, isolation valve will leave in auto, flight directors can come off. Electrical power has been established, the exterior lights are set as required, and we'll shortly get the cabin doors opened up. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed my best efforts to get the Zibo 737-800 from A to B. Overall I really enjoyed my time out in the aircraft and I'm rather wondering to myself why I haven't used it more in the past. Really impressed as well with enhanced skyscapes, I think that's a complete game changer for X-Plane 11. We'll see what X-Plane 12 brings us further down the road, but overall for me, Enhanced Skyscapes has really introduced a new lease of life into the sim. It's certainly been nice getting back into X-Plane and flying a high-fidelity, study-level jet. If you enjoyed our outing today, then please consider giving the video a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. Again, I will be planning to cover the PMDG 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator when that releases. As ever, a very big thank you to those who support the channel financially, my channel members and patrons. It's very much appreciated. I hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.